Next, I would like to invite someone who has a personal experience to share with you all as we advocate for an end to homelessness in our community. Bradford, can you please join me on stage?
Hey, Larry, can you hear me now? How about over there? Can you hear me over there? Okay, great. I'm absolutely terrified. I almost bought my first adult diaper. Please bear with me. Oh, I've met some of you already, and you're beautiful people. Oh, what a great morning, and what a delicious breakfast. My name is Brad. Some people call me Bradford. It turned out at one point there were 3 Brads and Pads, and so I had to use my formal name for the first time in my life. The other guy became Bradley, and the third Brad was just Brad. However, recently there's a group of people who decided that I'm now B-Rad. And I'm a rapper, and I got my own. And then there's a friend who saw Forrest Gump, and there's a character in Forrest Gump, and he decided that I am now Buford. Only one guy, but his name is Duke. So the two of us partnered up. Because we're eating, I've written a prayer, if you don't mind. Thank you, God, for the roof over my head, a bed to sleep in, food on my table, and shoes on my feet. Forgive me if I ever start to complain and forget my great blessings. Amen. I'm in recovery from extreme alcohol abuse, and I'm doing okay with an attitude of one day at a time. And I'm grateful for what I have instead of lamenting about what I do not have. As the Rolling Stones said, you can't always get what you want. You get what you need, and I feel blessed for that. I owe much to the donors, you folks, you volunteers, the PAD staff, and especially those nightly site managers, because I was part of the old system that moved around to a different place every single night. Truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and for giving and expecting nothing in return. I learned from you that it's truly more blessed to give than receive from your actions and your smiles while serving, and your gifts daily during my 6 years homeless. Now I try to do as you have demonstrated. You were good examples. That's why I volunteered to speak today. Please let me give you a brief biography of my life. I was born in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and I eventually had 4 brothers and sisters. I was almost born in Canada, but my father and mother were on a double date with a fellow who owned an airplane, and they were on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, and my mother went into labor, and my father freaked out because he wanted me to become president. Yeah, who wants that job? Man. So from birth on, there was a lot of pressure applied by my father. Yeah, he was very, very overbearing. And by 9 years old, I was on the payroll at the newspaper and printing plant that he worked at. And I also had a paper boy route. And I just loved my father. I didn't know any better. And I always went to the office with him and marveled at mechanical things, which is why I love bike riding and building bikes and things like that. I also melted lead ingots to cast type for letterpress printing, even as the transition to computer-generated offset printing was occurring in the late 1960s. So I'm from Wisconsin, and I'm a little slow. With such high expectations, my parents put a lot of pressure on themselves too, and they both eventually became alcoholics. I struggled in high school, but I made it. And then I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and the impression of alcohol was made on me as the solution to everything. Remember also that drinking is kind of required culturally if you're in Wisconsin. And a Green Bay Packer fan, or if you attended the University of Wisconsin in Madison, or if you were a sailor, or a fisherman, or a hunter, or a hockey player, or if you wanted to meet women. Alcohol was SOS, which means Standard Operating Procedure. I always drank like a gentleman until I got divorced. And I had bad luck. I got divorced and lost my well-paying job all in the same week. So I was very depressed. I had drank beer and wine and was a gourmet, but after divorce, I immediately began to turbo drink. I quit messing around. And so I was one of those guys who buys those big half gallons of vodka because it's cheaper. And I pretty much was drunk all the time until I eventually lost my home. I was evicted from my own home because I was too darn lazy to get a renter. And I had a bad day. That day cost me about $500,000. So I was out in the street with a house full of furniture, 2 cars, and a revoked driver's license. And I really didn't know what to do. I was a mess. I really was. It was rock bottom. It happens. Remember, I had 2 daughters and a lovely wife, and then I had nothing. Nothing. And I was heartbroken. I drank, like a lot of people, to solve depression. And it turns out medically, that's pretty much the worst thing you could possibly do. But that's the disease, folks. A friend at church told me about pads, and I'd never, ever heard of it. Never. Well, I needed a solution because I was staying in a motel room in Naperville that had roaches everywhere. It was a mess. And all I had was a bicycle and what I could carry. So I arrived at pads at the Protestant church on Thursday night by a taxi cab. And fortunately, they took me in, although I didn't do any intake or anything like that. This was June 11 of 2011, so I'd been drinking for 11 years, nonstop. Hardly took a breath of air. Fell asleep every night in a lazy boy with the TV on. Didn't brush my teeth. Eventually, I did get dental care through pads, and they said I had 14 cavities. And I went, how the heck did that happen? Well, I just told you. When you black out, you don't brush your teeth. So when I arrived at pads, I was 1 week sober and 70% sure I would die at my own hand. Before my life turned this direction, I was the opposite. I was 70% on the sunny side of life, you know, kind of like Kelly Ripa. That was my personality. I've always admired her bouncy, happy, outgoing, positive attitude, and I used to be like that. but now I was at the bottom of the barrel, and the future was very uncertain. Coming out of isolation, I really didn't have an instruction manual to repair my life. What PADS did was firstly fix my health. I was very underweight, 140 pounds. All I did was drink. And I hadn't had a good night of sleep in years. Well, I started to feel better. I was so lazy, and these sites kept me moving around. So I was forced to ride my bike huge distances just to get food and sleep. However, what I thought was terribly bad thing turned out to be a good thing. I think there's a Bible passage about that, right, sisters? So I ended up riding more than 5,000 miles yearly, which averages out to 14 miles a day. I dealt with addiction this way, and while I was moving around, I attended many, many recovery meetings, at least one a day. I also learned how to live with just the bags I could carry. That included all the things I needed for survival, including bicycle repair tubes, spare tire tubes, first aid, clothing for rain and snow, and to ride every day, rain or shine. Those were my to-go bags. I had a few case managers through that 6 years that I was homeless, and they helped mend me emotionally and challenged me to grow. Thank you, Tori. Right there. I had food stamps, but I hardly needed them thanks to the 3 square meals and the excellent food that all of those site managers and volunteers brought. Man, I've never had food like that. And I hate cooking for one. PADS became the routine structure that I needed. Another strange thing happened because so many sites were in churches. I learned to be grateful, and I was spiritually enriched. Those volunteers all became great examples of balanced, normal people, and I didn't know anything about that. Slowly but surely, I was growing into a better man and thinking correctly. I developed empathy for my fellow man, and my respect for others returned. So did my upbeat attitude, and I was finally having hope for the future. My smile and my will to live came back. I was back to 70% wanting to live and 30% swerving on my bicycle in front of that dump truck. That's a big change. After arriving in June of 2011, it was time to graduate in June of 2017. That was really hard and really scary for me. I had to make the greatest sales pitch of my life because I was what they called Section 8. I had chosen Glen Ellen because I had already had 2 bicycles stolen, and I wanted a community that was a little bit safer and to protect the only asset I really had, bicycles. Well, I found an open-minded landlord, and I did all the paperwork for him except for his signatures, and all he had to do was sign, and he took a shot. He gave me a tour of the apartment, and I rented it in 5 minutes before he could change his mind. I've been there living a stable life on my own now for 7 years, and I love it. Perfect timing. I'm back. He told me that the biggest pain he has, besides maintenance of the building and me getting locked out of my own apartment, is collecting rent from dozens of renters that have issues and get behind, and he's got to memorize all this in his head. However, the big chunk of my rent from Section 8 comes from the federal government electronically and reliably, whether it's Sunday or a holiday. My landlord said thank you and admitted he was almost prejudiced and is actually delighted to have me as a great tenant. I'm steady and I'm predictable. Once again, what he thought would be bad turned out to be very good thing. Of course, I do my part and make sure I'm always on time with my portion of the rent. He has a health issue, so I help him out as sort of a maintenance man. And I traded in 14 miles of biking daily for about 5, 6, my place to Aldi and back. I still ride almost every day for 61 years. I have 6 bicycles, and I'm working to get a driver's license because I'm almost 69 years old, and my ass is getting really sore. My new stress reliever is gardening and walking, and I've established some perennial gardens for my landlord because he has endless patches of that red mulch with nothing growing in it. Currently, I'm 13 years sober, 13 and a half years sober. Thank you. I'm 7 years in a decent one-room apartment that has wood floors, and I Swiffer every day. I learned to cook. I'm not working now, but I did work for 2 years at DuPage Medical before it became Dooley Medical. But I got out of there right at the beginning of COVID. I figured I might be in the wrong place at the wrong time when COVID hit. I retired 5 months ago, and I have a little money now, which is actually frightening. It's frightening. Because I used to live on $2 a day. Starbucks, that's it. Both of my parents died happily of old age, and I was there to helpfully see them and help my family. I'm very proud of that, to be sober for your parents and your family. They got to see the big comeback. They got to see it just in the nick of time. I got my smile back. I got my humor back. I'm saying life is good again. And I owe it to you. I owe it to Pads. Folks, please let me stand before you as proof that you've made a miracle happen to me and my homeless friends, because I'm not the only one, with your donations, your services, your churches, especially your food, your examples, your tolerance, your smiles, your kindness, and let's not forget your prayers, which I think really worked on me one day at a time. Look for me on my bicycle. I'm everywhere. And I'm out there looking for a easy job. I kind of lost a few years, and I'm underfunded in my retirement. I'll make it work. This dumb guy sure got lucky. Thank you for helping me get my smile back. Thank you for your becoming my family. We're not related by blood, but we are related by experience. Thank you. I'm grateful.